Hi people, Chilli here for a 5-minute review on Yes's 22nd new album, The Quest. And as such, how does a band that has been around since the late 60s, famous for writing complicated and long musical pieces, stack up in the modern day? Most young people wouldn't know who Yes are, but would have heard the song Roundabout from the To Be Continued memes. So, where does this album stand? Will it contain another roundabout, or is it a big meme? The ice bridge opens up and I immediately got vibes from Going for the One with that piano intro. It is a big effect that is in your face. There's a decent bass line throughout this song and Steve Howe plays his signature guitar style throughout the song. It's certainly catchy for a Yes song and is a good choice for the opening track. Dare to Know is the following track. And Dare to Know almost had me at the start with that progression before suddenly changing. It's a quirky track with a musical change in the song fans can usually expect from the band, albeit usually in longer tracks. The track peaks in ambition with the addition of the orchestra to help add presence, followed by Howe's guitar style of volume increase note playing as it's added into the track. Overall, a pretty decent track that feels somewhat cramped. Minus the Man is the next track, and Minus the Man is another eclectic track that has Billy's bass in the foreground for parts of the track and some solid drum work. Tight and yet with a simplicity to the complexities. I wrote this song off initially, but after subsequent listens, it is certainly a great track. Leave Well Alone is probably the first Yes track that reminds me of the band of old. If this song was recorded using older technology, then you could swear it was some of their older material. It's got a solid build-up with some great shifts throughout, but it somehow feels a bit flat. It doesn't have quite the chops worthy of sinking your teeth into. The Western Edge follows, and this track felt really vanilla. It doesn't have any real standout parts and is short enough to be forgotten. Future Memories is next, and this serves as the acoustic track for the album. Lyrically it is poignant and it talks about loss and giving up. Not for everyone to hear, especially in these times, but a kind of beauty resides in the musical side of this track. Music to My Ears is the next track, and it is just average and repetitive. It sounds like Yes became a lounge act. Rename this to Muzak to My Ears and we have a more suitable song title. A Living Island is the following track, and it has a small acoustic intro until the vocals begin and we are welcome to this average song. I mean, it's just not Yes. It's a generic contemporary middle-aged to late-aged rock group sound at its heart. Next. The following track is Sister Sleeping Soul. And before I talk about this song, I just want to point out that the following tracks are on CD 2 of an album that is collectively less than 65 minutes in its runtime. In other words, the decision to make a second disc was disadvantageous to a listener and for production. The track itself is okay. Kind of got that 60s acoustic psychedelic sound to it in parts. It's probably the most hippie sounding track and title I have heard in a long time. Mystery Tour is next, and for a moment I thought that was the name of the van in Scooby-Doo series. At least that would make it more interesting than this gushing Beatles fandom track. Pull the song's mask off and you'll see the truth beneath it. Why, it's nostalgia! Damaged World closes out this album, and it feels like Yes have attempted to do a country tune at first. This song is pretty simple for most of the part, nothing springs out unexpectedly, and it's just there to round out the album. The tempo shift towards the end near the solo was about the biggest change, but it's as spicy as pepper. Meh. With the songs out of the way, I think it's time for me to go on a rant. One of the first things I saw someone post about this album was it sounds more like Yes than any album from the past 15 years. And I've heard this line several times before, but I have to call bullshit. It sounds like their recent style for sure, but this album doesn't stand out from any of their other releases in the 21st century. The problem with a band with a long rich history like Yes is people want them to sound like their glory days, and when none of the members in the lineup are original members, then you won't get that original style. The longest serving band member is actually not Steve Howe, but their drummer Alan White. The band timeline of members throughout its history is as complex as their music at times. While the departure of John Anderson was mitigated by getting the younger John Davison, who is very similar in sound, the same cannot be said, however, about Chris Squire's replacement, Billy Sherwood. Although Billy is a very gifted bass player, no one will match Chris, and he was the backbone in tone to their sound, and is abundantly obvious the band are missing him in the songwriting department. But this is half the problem, really. The problem doesn't stop with the band, but also the issue of the prog rock scene, and that is that the crowds peaked in the 70s and struggled to find newer fans later on. I mean, in prog rock's heyday, you had some huge bands like King Crimson, Pink Floyd, Genesis, Rush, and leading them all was Yes. Unfortunately, prog rock shares an issue that it has from the genre it takes an influence from, the jazz scene, in that, in their pure forms, they are both a dying genre. There is not enough new blood in the scene, and the bands and members that have all survived find themselves in lawsuits suing for ownership of bands' names. At the end of the day, I think Yes should do the Rolling Stones approach and not gamble albums, but instead focus on singles or EPs. I would prefer 2 great songs from Yes rather than 11 average tracks at the end of the day. There really isn't much on this album that stands out to me, besides maybe the first track and minus the man. I give it a 4 out of 10. It's not the worst album, but it's just average.